Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Today on the podcast, we're going to figure out if you can be too old or too young to invest in rental properties. And to help me figure this out, I've got two guests on the show. Terry, how old were you when you bought your very first rental property?
Dan, I was 55 years old.
And how old are you now?
I just turned 65 this week.
And to contrast that, Odest, how old were you when you bought your first rental?
And I was 25 when I bought my first property.
And how old are you now?
I'm 47 as of now.
Both of our guests on the podcast today started buying rental properties at very different times in their life, but they've both been very successful with it. And on the show today, we're going to see if maybe they had different ways of going about it, see if maybe they had different goals. We'll talk about their strategies. We'll see if being young or being old can be an advantage or a disadvantage, and if thinking you're too young or too old is really just a limiting belief. Joining us on the podcast today from Memphis is Terry Roberts, and from Los Angeles, Odest Riley. We'll take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to our guests. For decades, real estate has been a cornerstone of the world's largest portfolios, but it's also historically been complex, time-consuming, and expensive. But imagine if real estate investing was suddenly easy. All the benefits of owning real, tangible assets without all the complexity and expense. That's the power of the Fundrise Flagship Real Estate Fund. Now you can invest in a $1.1 billion portfolio of real estate starting with as little as $10. 4,700 single-family rental homes spread across the booming Sunbelt. 3.3 million square feet of highly sought-after industrial facilities thanks to the e-commerce wave. The Flagship Fund is one of the largest of its kind, well-diversified, and managed by a team of professionals. And now it's available to you. Visit fundrise.com/RIP to explore the fund's full portfolio, check out historical returns, and start investing in just minutes. Carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the Fundrise Flagship Fund before investing. This and other information can be found in the fund's perspective at fundrise.com/flagship. This is a paid advertisement. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property, and when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Investing in rental properties can be complicated, but it doesn't have to be. My friends at MidSouth HomeBuyers sell completely rehab turnkey properties in both Memphis and Little Rock, and they've been doing it for 23 years. All their properties come totally rehab. They put on a new roof, new kitchen, new bath, new plumbing, new electric. Everything is brand new. They also have a tenant that's moved in before you close, so you get cash flow on day one. MidSouth HomeBuyers also continues to manage the property for you after closing. It couldn't be easier. Everything is 100% done for you. All their properties also come with a couple of guarantees. They have a 1-year total maintenance warranty and a lifetime occupancy guarantee. Personally, I just closed on my 5th property with MidSouth HomeBuyers, and I couldn't be happier. If you want to talk to a happy customer, reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions, or you can check them out at midsouthhomebuyers.com. Let's start things off talking about your portfolios. Terry, what does your portfolio look like?
Dan, today I have a total of 6 properties. They are all free and clear, completely paid for. And as I mentioned earlier, we started in 2015. I pivoted a couple times over the last 10 years. I started out just doing long-term rentals. And then a few years back, I pivoted, and I've got 4 of the 6 now as midterm rentals. And if my other two tenants will ever leave, I'll convert the other to midterm. It's worked out so well for me.
And Otis, what about you? What does your portfolio look like?
So currently I have 12 doors. I have a fourplex in Los Angeles, California. I have units in Jackson, Tennessee, and I have units in Chicago, Illinois. And with those, they're all long-term. I'm not good with the short-term rental. I generally try to get a property management company to take care of that so I don't have to deal with the day-to-day headaches.
So you two are both at different places in life, different points in your investing career. Well, let me talk about your strategy. So are you guys investing for cash flow or appreciation or maybe something else? Like what's your long-term goal with the properties?
Dan, my original launch into this was, as we discussed a few years back, was cash flow basically for retirement. I was just looking for an additional revenue stream as I was, looking at my retirement. And man, I've changed my position over the last number of years. I still look for cash flow, but that first property I bought back in 2015 was $108,000, and today it's worth about $250,000. That same property has generated over $171,000 in revenue in that 10-year period, and it currently kicks out $34,000 a year. So it's really ramped up by going to the midterm rental position. And I still have long-term rentals too, but that was my position, was basically just earning extra money in retirement.
And I guess you weren't really counting on the appreciation.
Not at all. And I tell you, I look back at it, I looked at it earlier today just preparing for this. And I mean, the house was appreciating by just a few $1,000s a year until we hit 2021 and then 2022. And then things just really jumped up in 21, 22, 23. And with that, increased expenses in terms of insurance and property tax and everything else. But with that, the rents have gone way up. But the appreciation has certainly been something wonderful. The depreciation has certainly been wonderful for me. The only regret is I wish I had more, because going into this, I was so debt adverse. At that age, I'm thinking, man, I'm not going to pile on a bunch of extra debt and have that to deal with. But if I had to do it over with, I would have bought double, triple what I have now.
That's interesting. So you kind of had a very conservative approach going into it, but looking back on it now, you maybe didn't need to be so conservative in those early days.
I was incredibly conservative fiscally, and I'm very interested to hear Odest, his story, but I was just scared to death going into it. I'm thinking, man, what if I buy this and it doesn't rent? And it's just the silliest thoughts nowadays. Yeah. And I just don't. It's never not been rented. I mean, I get multiple calls every week for people wanting to rent my properties, and I don't have anything available. And I'm currently looking for some land to build some rentals, because I can make that work. So
Otis, what about you?
For me, it's funny. It's a little different. I am a more cash on cash type of guy. I like to get cash coming in from my properties and make sure that they're always cash flowing. And anything that's out of state, it's usually a little cheaper to get into that market. So I'll go for those at a smaller price point, and I just want to make sure it cash flows. When I'm buying in Southern California, because properties are so expensive, I'm looking for my cash flow, of course, but I also do appreciate a little bit of appreciation, that long-term investment standpoint.
Yeah.
For me, when I got started, it was more of just coincidence that I was learning how to do it. A girlfriend got me to buy a property at a cheaper price in Chicago when I was in school. Bought that property and ended up buying another unit in the apartment building at that time. And that's how I started to learn the value of like that rental income. I essentially was making enough from the rental income on that one unit to cover my mortgage on the other property. And that's the first time I was like, oh, wow, I can work a lot less doing this. For me, one of the things I definitely I laugh when I hear him say like he wish he was more aggressive. I started off exactly opposite. I got too aggressive. It was such a good time. Money was free around that time, 2006, 2007. Everybody was able to buy anything they wanted to. I started to buy some investment properties, not really understanding the business model. And when 2008 hit, I had to turn over some keys on a property because everybody could afford to buy. And I lost properties because I was using an American Express to cash flow me, not understanding leverage 100%.
Yeah.
I look back on it now with things I know at 47, I would have definitely been able to keep all those properties and probably grow my portfolio a lot. But I was a little too aggressive, looking to retire at a young age. And at that time, I was like, I'll be retired by the time I'm 40. Things don't always turn out exactly what we want, but things have been pretty good.
Right. So now thinking back to when you were first getting started, back when you were in your 20s, did you have any self-doubt that maybe you were too young to do this?
Honestly, I was too dumb to know any better. I grew up in apartment buildings. My dad's a blue collar guy, hard working. He always made sure we had a roof over our head and all the meals we could eat. But he just never talked to me about buying a house. And I never thought about buying a house or a condo or anything until my girlfriend was like, why are you paying so much in rent? Yeah. You should just buy something. I ended up buying a property and was like, oh, wow, this isn't that hard. And then bought the second one. And because I didn't know any better, I just kind of just started saying, hey, okay, well, let's look at this property. If I take out a loan on this, I can get another one. Like it was a lack of knowledge, which actually allowed me to do good. It's kind of a funny story.
So do you think that lack of knowledge and lack of experience was actually maybe a benefit that maybe you wouldn't be where you are today if you hadn't have taken those chances at a young age?
100%. If I was how fiscally responsible I am and how conservative I am now, I wouldn't have taken the chance. It's like I wouldn't have taken my 401k out to buy the unit because I would have been thinking, well, compound interest, I'm going to lose money. Like it just wasn't a thought. It was like, well, I got $15,000 in this account. That'll be a down payment. Let's do it. And it was no thoughts. And now I'm like, okay, how much I would run the numbers to see how much I'm going to lose, what's the tax implications are going to be. And since I didn't have a lot of those things hanging over my head, also no wife or kids, I just was like, hey, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Right. So your youth was really an advantage.
Because you can, when you're young, you think you're superhuman, first of all.
Right.
And then secondly, the road in front of you, you feel like it's so long, you can make mistakes and just make up for them along the way.
Right.
Whereas now I'm a little more, I wouldn't say gun shy, but that deal has to make a lot of sense.
Right. So Terry, to compare that to where you are at 65, do you feel like you can't make mistakes, that like you can't overpay for a property because, if you're in your 20s, if you overpay for a property, the market's going to kind of bail you out. You've got a lot of time for things to work out. But at 65, if you make a mistake, you might be 80 before you get out of that situation. Like, does that ever concern you?
No, because I'm not going to make that mistake. I've listened to too many of your episodes, Dan, and I have to compliment you. I mean, you're such a humble servant of this space. You've done over 500 shows. I learned so much from just listening to your podcast. And I always say experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And I listened to a lot of your landlords that you've or investors that you've interviewed, and I've learned from them. And my mentor told me, you make your money when you buy the property, and I really truly believe in that. I mean, it may pencil out, but it may not be a good deal. It makes no sense to do it. And listening to Odest, his story, I love that. I absolutely love that. And you're right. When you're young, you're invincible. You got time. Room to make a mistake and all that. And Me at 55 when I started, I was very motivated, but I was scared to death. I was paralyzed. I bet for 2 years I looked at every rental property in this county, and I would go in and pick them apart and find something wrong with them and not buy them. And now I drive by those same properties that I could have bought for very low prices, and I just kick myself.
Yeah.
So I guess if there's listeners out there like we were, learning and from this podcast, do not be afraid. Don't listen to your friends that come to you and say, oh, I don't want to be a landlord, or I don't want to do this, or, this person bought this house and had a foundation problem. Don't listen to that. Just educate
Never
yourself.
listen to it.
Yeah, there you go, Odest. I mean,
because it's like any other business. You lose. I love when people say, well, what if your units are all empty at the same time? And I'm like, well, what if your store, nobody comes in at never comes in.
Right.
I was like, it's like any other business. If you don't have any customers, you're going to go out of business.
Yeah. So as far as investing, I mean, it doesn't sound like 25 is too young. It doesn't sound like 65 is too old. Like, do you guys think you can be too young or too old to invest?
No, you cannot be too young or too old. My son is 10 years old, and I've already turned him into an investor. He invests in stock. He invests in property. He invests in his bobblehead collection. Like, he has to understand what a liability and an asset is at all times. Anytime he's buying something, that's the question he has to ask himself. And the biggest thing Terry said that I love is this, something that was told to me by my dad as well. You make your money on the purchase.
Yep.
So anytime you're buying something that you think is an investment, especially real estate, you make your money on the purchase. You don't make it on the sale. Yep. So you have to do your homework. And that's the problem. Like, I love all the education that's out there now. I love the mentors. I love the classes. The only thing I'm always trying to explain to people is you can't go get a mentor and then expect them to do the work for you. You can't take a class and then expect somebody to read the book for you. You can't get a podcast and expect somebody to listen for it and take down the information. You have to do the work. There's no such thing as a free ride in America. Right. You have to get in there, get on that bike and start pedaling, or else you're going to stand still. And just like Terry said, you cannot listen to your friends talking about, oh, you're going to lose this and that. If you did the research, you got to take a risk. Mm-hmm. If you think it's going to pencil out the way you think it should, if you've done all the due diligence, you got the money to back you, you've got everything lined up, and that deal seems like it's a good deal, then you take a chance. If it's lining up and you're doing and it looks like it's a 50-50, or it looks like, oh, everything has to go right for this to make money, then you probably shouldn't do that deal. Right. Because there's always something that's going to go wrong. Right. A boiler's going to go out, a water heater, a window's going to get broken. Something's going to go wrong. The garage door is not going to open. So you have to have CapEx. You have to have some money put to the side to try to fix those things to get you through that to the end. For me, sometimes I'll do a flip and people be like, oh, I want to start flipping houses. And what they don't understand is you have to have money up front, because there's always something that goes wrong and you have to be able to carry that debt service to the end. And that's just basic planning.
Yeah, you can count on that. Things are always gonna come up. So Odest, thinking back to when you were in your 20s, like, did you have any like maybe like a limiting belief that you can't do this, or that the tenants aren't going to respect you because maybe they're in their 40s and you're in your 20s? Like, did that come up at all in your mind?
I think the biggest fear I had as a younger person was that I don't know what to do if something goes wrong. If I have to talk to a tenant, are they going to have any respect for me because I'm younger than them? It was like little things like that, just a lack of knowledge. Things that I laugh at now, like, I'm a landlord. What does it matter if I'm 25 and my tenant is 45? I'm the person who owns the property. You need to pay your rent and you need to respect my property, period. You set rules, you set boundaries, set guidelines, and you move forward. So I would say I had a little bit of those limiting beliefs. It was just a lack of wisdom. That's one of the biggest things, I think, when you're younger. You may have all the knowledge from books and from school, but you don't have a track history to understand how people work sometimes. Yeah. So that's sometimes things you have to grow into, is just working with more people, having more conversations, building more relationships, and that makes you a lot wiser as you move forward.
So now, as far as building generational wealth, we really, as rental property investors, are in such a great position to be able to help our future generations continue to build out the portfolio. Is this something you think about? Odest, you mentioned that you're teaching your kids how to invest. Do you think your kids will carry on the rental portfolio in the future?
I definitely think my son will. I'm a broker by trade, and my son has been walking properties with me since he was 2. He can walk you through a house from the front door to the back door and tell you exactly what everything is, why this is the suite, why it's the master, why these lights are like this, because I haven't made it work for him. It's just been like, hey, we need to go look at this property. Hey, daddy needs to go do something. Let's go. And it's not a, do you want to go? It's so to him, it wasn't work at first. It was just what we were doing. And that gives him the ability to understand also, like when I have to go collect rents or I have to do something, like this is a part of the work too. Like those checks don't just automatically appear into our account. Hey, somebody's behind on rent. We need to go have a conversation with them, ask them what's going on. Are they okay? Do they need anything? What do we need to do to get this back on track? So he sees those conversations, and it's not in a disrespectful way. It's a people business. So we're out there working with people. And so my goal is for him to have the skill set to whatever he wants to do when he's younger. I want him to be an owner. I want him to take ownership. Whatever business it is, he should have an understanding that everything in America works with relationships. Yeah. So if you want to really be wealthy, you have to build strong, lasting relationships. So you buy your property, you put in good tenants, you know the neighbors, you know the people who work at the planning department and the city. All those things are important to make sure that you're successful. And if you have that network of people and a good understanding of assets and liability, you can grow your wealth exponentially.
So, Terry, what about you? Have you given any thought to maybe passing your rentals down to your kids at some point?
When I'm happy with them, sure. No, I am. I have 3 daughters, and I've already divided up my estate. But I will say this: my youngest daughter moved to Memphis, and she actually owned a home in a neighborhood where I own a bunch of rental properties. And she got married, and we have a wonderful granddaughter. And this house is it's in a great area, but the school district is just not top notch. It's good, it's not great. So she decided they would move out to another area that's got phenomenal schools, and they did that. And I thought, well, we'll sell that house or whatever. And she calls me up and says, "Dad, I'd like to rent this house like you do." And so we did it. We made it as a midterm rental. And they turned around and rented that house. And even after their mortgage, insurance, and taxes, they're making enough money that covers their mortgage, insurance, and taxes on their new home. So it's a house hack. Odest talked about that with his, I guess it was a condo and apartment or something that he was doing in Chicago as a student. Well, now my daughter's doing that here in Memphis, so they have their first rental property. And then this project that I'm working on currently is to create some duplexes to do midterm rentals out of. And my plan there is to hire one of my daughters to manage that. We'll essentially retire her, and then of course it'll be theirs for the keeping. Involved in my trust when I like to say, stop taking appointments. So yes, I'm getting them involved in it whether they want to or not.
I love that. I don't think enough parents get that. Everything's not going to be fun.
Yeah.
And I think you can't make it work also. So like when I was saying, I was taking my son, because yes, everything I'm doing is for him. Mm-hmm. So when I hand this keys over to you, I can't not educate you on what the work is and then be mad if you don't know how to take care of it. And I see that way too many parents. They are so hardworking. They'll build a legacy, but they don't give an education. They just hand over millions of dollars of property and say, "Hey, go take care of this." And then they run it into the ground. And you're like, well, what did you expect? Right. You gave a 12-year-old keys to a car and said, "Go drive to the store." And they crashed. Well, that's what happens.
Right. So bottom line, it sounds like we're all in agreement that you you can't be too young or too old to invest in rental properties. If you take the time to educate yourself and make it happen, it seems like age shouldn't really matter. Do you guys both agree with that?
I say get a piece of property as early as possible. Anywhere you can, get it.
I'm envious of Odest for starting so young. I wish I would have, but I never looked up. I spent 40 years in corporate America, and I had my head down, and it wasn't until I'd hired some folks that worked for me that were in the rental business, and I was watching what they were doing. I thought, my goodness, this is incredible. And that's what really got me to kind of pivot into this market. And now I love it. I spend every day, focused on this work. And Odest made another really good comment about you got to do the work. I mean, if you treat this like a hobby, you lose your tail. You've got to really get yourself educated, and you've got to be prepared to do it. And the other thing he said, that talking about just handing over the keys to the car, you've got to learn how to manage it. You've got to learn how to take care of your stuff. And you can tell. I drive around some of the stuff here in Memphis and stuff, and you can just see these crappy yards and houses that need paint and all this stuff. People just neglect what they could be making so much more money and doing such a better job with it if they would just work with it,
All right. Well, I think we got this settled. Age does not matter. You cannot be too young or too old to invest in rental properties. Well, if anybody wants to reach out to Terry or Odest, I've got their contact information on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 511. I'd like to thank Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group for sponsoring today's episode. If you're looking to buy a rental property, whether you're just getting started or you want to add to your portfolio, reach out to Chaley. She's got a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something that'll work for you in your situation. If you want to find out more, you can track her down at ridgelendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you hit the follow button. I put out a new episode every single Tuesday, and if you're following the show, you'll get notified when the next episode comes out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.